There are moments on live television that no producer plans for, no publicist prepares their client against, and no amount of media training can prevent. The kind of moment where the entire architecture of someone's carefully constructed public image cracks, not from a dramatic confrontation, not from a shouting match, but from a single quiet question asked by someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. What happened in that Washington studio wasn't just a debate. It was a masterclass in the difference between performing confidence and actually having it. And by the end of the night, everyone in that room and everyone watching at home understood exactly which one Ivanka Trump had walked in with. The setting felt almost civilized at first. Downtown Washington. A studio lit for prime time. Audience settled in. Cameras warm. The kind of atmosphere that makes people believe they're about to watch a structured, professional exchange of ideas. Ivanka Trump arrived looking exactly the way she always looks. Composed, polished, every detail considered. Barack Obama arrived the way he always arrives, like someone who slept well and has absolutely nowhere to be except here. The moderator, a veteran journalist who has watched enough political theater to recognize real tension from performed tension, opened with something straightforward. What does character and leadership actually mean in today's world? Obama answered the way Obama answers things, without hurry, without theater. Character, he said, isn't about the moments you perform for an audience. It's about the decisions you make when there's no audience. It's how you treat people who have nothing to offer you in return. It's the willingness to admit when you got something wrong and then do the harder work of correcting it. Simple. Grounded. The kind of answer that lands because it costs nothing to say and everything to actually live by. The moderator turned to Ivanka. She didn't hesitate. That much you had to give her. Her answer came out polished and pointed, framed around action versus words, doing versus promising. Her father, she explained, leads through results, through buildings constructed and deals closed and jobs created. The implication underneath every sentence was clear. Pretty speeches are fine, but real leadership leaves something tangible behind. The audience stirred. Some nodded, others shifted. It was the kind of answer that plays well in certain rooms, and she knew it. Then she pushed further. Some leaders, she said, keeping her voice smooth and her smile intact, spend 8 years delivering inspiring messages about unity and hope, while a significant portion of the country felt overlooked and forgotten. My father doesn't wait for consensus. He moves. The challenge was direct, barely veiled. She was looking right at Obama when she said it. Obama let her finish. Didn't interrupt, didn't react visibly, just listened the way someone listens when they're not surprised by anything they're hearing. When the moderator turned back to him, he gave a small nod, almost as if he was, "I hear the point about action," he said. Results do matter. They matter enormously. But the kind of action matters just as much as the action itself. He paused, then pulled out a quote from 2016 that most people in that room recognized the moment the first few words landed. The line about being alone capable of fixing a broken system. The declaration that positioned one man as the singular solution to generational problems. That's not leadership through action, Obama said evenly. That's the language of a savior complex. Real, durable change doesn't get built by one person telling everyone else to stand back and watch. It gets built by bringing people into the process. All kinds of people, even the ones who disagree with you. The applause came hard and fast. A portion of the audience rose. The sound rolled through the studio and took a while to settle. Ivanka's smile stayed in place, but something behind it shifted. Not gone, recalibrated. She hit back quickly. Her recovery was smooth, professionally executed, the work of someone who has spent years in rooms where optics matter as much as substance. She talked about loyalty as a foundation, about her father fighting for his family, for his supporters, for the people who believed in him when the institutional machinery was working against him. She talked about the kind of love that fuels sustained effort, the idea that family-first values create leaders who don't fold when the pressure gets serious. It was well delivered, and she looked directly at Obama when she finished, an implicit dare to challenge the one ground she believed was unassailable: family. Obama listened, then leaned forward just slightly. "Loyalty is one of the genuinely important things in life," he said, and his voice had the quality of someone who actually means what they're saying rather than reading from a prepared position. "I've seen what loyalty built on real love and mutual respect can do for people. I respect it deeply." The room got quiet, but loyalty that shuts the door on truth, loyalty that protects the image instead of the reality, that version of loyalty doesn't serve the people who need serving. It protects the brand. And there's a significant difference between those two things. The audience erupted, some clapping hard, some shouting, some members clearly uncomfortable with how direct this had gotten. The moderator raised both hands like a referee, but the sound had already said what it needed to say. Ivanka's face had changed. The flush was visible now. The practice smile was working harder than it had been 60 seconds ago. Obama turned slightly toward the control booth and asked for a slide. The screen behind them lit up with something straightforward: numbers, unemployment figures when he left office, sustained job growth across his second term. Then, on the right side of the screen, the economic disruption of 2020, the spike in unemployment, the collapse of certain sectors, the supply chain fractures that cost families real money in real time. "These aren't arguments," he said simply. "They're not positions or perspectives. They're documented outcomes." He walked through them without embellishment: the millions who gained health coverage, the sustained growth before he left office, the metrics that don't bend based on who's telling the story. The audience reacted like a crowd that had just watched a clean knockout. People were on their feet in sections. The applause was loud and clear and sustained. Ivanka waited for it to subside, then reached for higher ground. "The numbers," she said, "don't capture the full picture." She returned to loyalty, to the idea that what sustains a leader through genuine adversity isn't data, it's the people standing beside them. Family, commitment, the kind of relationships that don't dissolve when the institutional opinion turns against you. She glanced at him as she finished, confident she'd found the one lane where his stats couldn't follow her. Obama let a brief silence exist before responding. He said that loyalty, in the right form, is admirable and even necessary. But then he said the thing that changed the temperature of the entire studio. When loyalty becomes armor against accountability, when it stops being about protecting people and starts being about protecting a story, it doesn't function as strength anymore. It functions as a blind spot. And blind spots in leadership don't stay personal. They become policy. And policy costs real people real things. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Exactly the kind of division that means something real just got said. Half the room was applauding loudly. The other half was loudly disagreeing. The moderator looked like a man managing something significantly larger than he'd prepared for. Ivanka's cheeks were flushed. For the first time, the smoothness she'd maintained through the whole exchange had started to show stress fractures. She pointed in his direction, and her voice rose with genuine fire. She challenged him to prove it, to demonstrate, concretely, that anything he'd described had actually moved the needle for the Americans who felt furthest from the institutions he'd led. Obama didn't look threatened. "I will," he said. 2 words. Quiet. Undecorated. The moderator cleared his throat and tried to redirect. Both of them had strong family ties. How did family shape their approach to leadership? Ivanka seized the question immediately, sitting straighter, her voice warming into something personal and composed. Her father's family is his foundation, she explained. Everything he does originates from that core loyalty, the love he has for his children, for the people who trust him, for those who stood with him when the opposition was overwhelming. That love becomes the engine that keeps him moving when circumstances would stop anyone else. It was her best answer of the night, and she knew it. Her chin came up slightly as she finished. Obama sat with it for a moment. Then he tilted his head slightly and asked a question in the most conversational voice imaginable, the kind that sounds almost like idle curiosity. Barron is your brother? The studio froze. Not figuratively, it actually stopped. The audience didn't murmur. The moderator didn't redirect. The ambient sound of a room full of people simply vanished for several complete seconds as everyone processed what had just been asked and why it had been asked the way it was asked. Ivanka's smile locked. Her eyes widened. The practiced confidence she'd carried into the studio like a shield went absolutely rigid. She let out a short laugh that didn't match her face. Of course, she said. Everyone knows that. Her voice was half a pitch higher than it had been. Her hands, which had been resting easy on Obama, didn't press. He didn't lean in. He simply looked at her with that steady, unhurried gaze and spoke quietly. When family becomes the primary defense rather than one part of a larger structure, he said, truth starts to feel optional. You protect the name. You protect the image. You protect what the brand is supposed to represent. And somewhere in that process of protection, the actual obligation to the country, to the facts, to the people who have nothing to do with your family, that obligation starts to slip. Ivanka's hands were shaking. The camera didn't miss it. Her knuckles had gone white where she was gripping the table's edge. She tried to fold her hands in her lap, but the movement only made the trembling more visible. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She closed it. The room held its breath. When she did respond, the words came out fast and sharp. This was personal, she said. This was an attack on her family. This had nothing to do with leadership and everything to do with trying to humiliate someone on television. Her voice cracked slightly on the last sentence. Obama nodded toward the booth and asked them to play a clip. The footage was short. 10 seconds of Donald Trump in the Oval Office, visibly proud, pointing directly at Ivanka and telling the room she was his finest advisor, that no one understood the decisions being made better than she did. The audience reacted the way audiences react when something they suspected gets confirmed on a screen in front of them. The gasps were immediate. The murmuring was loud. Some people stood up. Obama looked directly at Ivanka, voice still even, still measured. When the people advising on national policy are selected primarily by bloodline rather than expertise, he said, the country absorbs the consequences. The 2018 tariff decisions, pushed hard, resisted by economists who modeled the downstream effects, cost American farming families billions in lost exports when trading partners retaliated. Those aren't abstract numbers. Those are generational farms that didn't survive. Jobs that didn't come back. He let that land. Family loyalty as the organizing principle of a business is understandable. As the organizing principle of a government, it's something different entirely. The studio was in open reaction now, applause from one section, pushback from another, a moderator who had visibly stopped trying to control the pace and was simply trying to keep the room from coming apart. Ivanka's voice rose with real anger this time. Unfiltered. She told him he didn't know her family, didn't know what they'd sacrificed, didn't have any standing to sit across from her and deliver this kind of judgment. Her voice cracked on the word disgusting. Obama waited until the room was quiet enough to hear him without effort. Then he reminded her, gently and precisely, that in 2016 she had said publicly, on record, that the only way to maintain public trust is to maintain clear separation between business interest and political decision-making. Her words. Her position. Her 2016 self delivered back to her in 2024 with no editorial comment, no spin, no additional framing. The applause that followed wasn't explosive. It was something heavier. The sustained sound of a room recognizing that the argument had just been closed from the inside. Ivanka sat very still. The color had drained from her face. Her hands were clenched so tight in her lap that the tension showed in her forearms. She was speaking, but the words were coming out fractured, accusations of twisting, of unfairness, of going too far. The voice that had opened the evening as smooth and deliberate as polished marble now sounded thin and strained. Obama nodded toward the booth one final time. A 12-second audio recording played through the studio speakers. Donald Trump's voice, unmistakably his, low and direct. "We don't need facts right now. We need loyalty. Loyalty above everything." The room didn't erupt this time. It stilled. That kind of still that follows something genuinely shocking. The silence that means people are processing rather than reacting. That the information is still traveling from the ears to the part of the brain that knows what to do with it. Ivanka shook her head. Her voice was barely holding together. "Out of context," she said. "Private. Unfair." The words came out in pieces, nothing connected to anything else. The moderator leaned toward her. "Miss Trump, are you all right?" She didn't answer the question. Obama spoke into the quiet that followed, not to her, almost to the room itself. Real leadership means being willing to protect the country from poor decisions, even when those decisions come from people you love. Loyalty is a virtue, but when it replaces truth as the operating system, it doesn't serve anyone, not even the family it claims to be protecting. Ivanka pushed her chair back. She stood, and her legs weren't entirely steady. She pressed one hand against the table's edge to collect herself. She said she had another commitment, that the conversation had gone far enough. Her voice, searching for the professional register she'd arrived with, found something thinner and less certain instead. She walked toward the exit. The click of her heels on the studio floor was the only sound in the room. Every person in the audience watched her go. No one applauded. No one said anything. They simply watched until she disappeared behind the curtain and the sound of her footsteps faded. Obama remained seated. He didn't look triumphant. He didn't look around the room for validation. He simply sat with the quiet the way someone sits with something they've been carrying for a long time. Not relieved exactly, but resolved. After a moment, he looked out at the audience, then directly into the lens of the main camera with the knowledge that the people at home were still watching. "Truth is patient," he said. "It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need theatrics or a prepared audio clip. It just needs enough space to be heard. And eventually, always, it finds that space." The standing ovation came in a wave, loud, sustained, the kind that builds on itself because the room needs somewhere to put everything it just witnessed. Obama stood, shook the moderator's hand, and walked toward the side exit. At the edge of the stage, he paused, almost to himself. "It was never about winning," he said quietly. "It was always about clarity." Backstage, in front of a mirror she wasn't really seeing, Ivanka stood alone. Makeup perfect, hair in place, hands still trembling against the counter despite everything she was doing to stop them. A young staffer appeared in the doorway, hesitated, and asked softly if she needed anything. No answer came. Just her reflection staring back at her, polished on the surface, something much more unsettled underneath. No prepared line available. No spin ready. No carefully calculated pivot waiting in reserve. For the first time in a very long time, the armor had found its limit, and the question that had cracked it open, asked so quietly, so simply, without a single raised decibel, kept replaying in the minds of everyone who'd been in that room. Not as an accusation, just as a question, the most dangerous kind.